We should have a lot of respect for Native Americans, those who populated this land before the first European white man set foot on these shores. History rarely mentions it, but countless thousands of those Native American Indians were killed by disease and carried in the boats of those early traders. But before that, the American Indian had a thriving culture in tune with nature and appreciative of the beauty around them. Of all the cultures referred to as primitive by supposedly civilized society, this is the culture we know the most about. Yet at the same time, we know very little about them. Sadly, history in Hollywood has not treated the Native Americans fairly, portraying them as a barbaric culture, mostly responsible for attacking white settlers and committing atrocities on them. The Native American peoples lived with much less technology than even the earliest European settlers had access to. They had no firearms, no wheeled transport, and no industry at all. But despite all of that, they managed to survive in the often harsh conditions of the American wilderness. In fact, they were better at surviving than the early settlers. Every winter, the weather, famine, and native attacks took their toll on the first colonies. Native Americans had highly developed traditional survival skills. How did they use those skills to not just endure in the American environment, but to thrive and dominate it for thousands of years? The Native Americans had to get everything they needed from nature, and they did, whether it was flint to start a fire or animal skins to make clothes. They found everything they needed in the world around them. Few of us would be able to survive if we were just dumped in the wilderness with nothing. But for the Native Americans, it was just everyday life. It is important to note here that the Native Americans were satisfied with what nature provided. While many Native American cultures use gold and silver, they were not seeking to amass wealth to themselves. They were satisfied with the lives they had and not wanting anything more. If there were ever a people who lived in harmony with their surroundings, it was the Native American Indian. They took what they needed from nature, but did so without destroying nature. They learned the sounds and movements of the animals and could read their signs. More than anything, they studied everything around them. There were always tribes which were friendly to the white man. We all know the Indians taught the Pilgrims how to plant and cultivate. Had it not been for the knowledge of the Indians and their understanding of nature, the United States would have died. Their knowledge of nature was unsurpassed and became the foundation of many learned works written by scholars who learned from them. One thing most of us know about Native Americans is that they lived in harmony with the land. They didn't believe it belonged to them. They were looking after it for future generations. They did manage the landscape, burning grasslands and forests to encourage new growth or clearing areas for farming, but they paid a lot of attention to making sure resources were conserved wherever possible. All Native American cultures were built around a deep and spiritual connection to the land. To feel a spiritual connection with something, you have to know it, and they certainly did. Native Americans constantly studied what was happening around them and learned to read the signs of the natural world. They learned to make quite accurate short-term weather forecasts. A ring around the moon reveals moisture in the atmosphere and is often a sign of rain. Flat-bottom clouds with a puffy or anvil-shaped top mean a thunderstorm is on its way. Animals could also signal changes in the weather. Horses get nervous when a storm is approaching. Many small animals, like squirrels, seem to have their ability to know when a long or cold winter is approaching. If they start gathering food stores earlier than usual and building a better supply, a few hard months could be ahead. These are important things for people to know. Surviving through the winter depended on having stores of dried food, and if that food was soaked by a storm before it was fully dried and packed away, it would probably spoil. For the extended family or tribe who were preparing it, that could mean disaster. A long winter also meant more food would be needed. So if the squirrels were building bigger stores, it was a good idea for the people to imitate them.